Hello, America. We know before America's founders were born, and when we don't know this as Americans, before America's founders were born, slavery was entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies, a torture, extortion, slavery method against everyone sickly distinctly. This is really why, more than how any other motivations, if forced to only be manifest. Why, for example, they had people, slaves, living in the same house with slave owners because everyone was enslaved sickly distinctly, because that was a method of measuring and maintaining. Other things others ourselves blamed besides the breaching method. And if you have rules with that and styles of that, styles of logic, syntax forced by nature itself, then you can measure and maintain what is increasingly incapable of interpreting nature's demonstrations of the breaching method and nature's demonstrations of us with needs to name it a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise. I am not a lawyer, but there is means to use the hyper evidential and to agree to call it the hyper evidential. For example, specifically for New Yorkers, distinctly from the rest of Americans, but also non distinctly. And because at countries A through Z, at locations, areas, and states at countries A through Z, recorded, hyper evidentially recorded, were and are self valued roles, blaming the real worst causes of the worst negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, effectively self cultivated, a breaching method maintained, hyper criminally foreign influence maintained, self cultivated roles at countries A through Z as the locations, areas, and states. So there's a shock and awe associated with leaders because now roles with criminal insidiousness natures of positives with criminal insidiousness natures of negatives, but also overt negatives. This breaching method assigned nature's demonstrations and nature's demonstrations of itself, which are also contained with that, to be blamed on other things, others, and or on selves. There's a method. See, because the news is allowed to tell lies, and with readings of statutes that are criminally foreign influence readings of statutes, and of the value of exception, and of exception nature as nature demonstrates. At every campus, they've been attaching people to faked and changed conversations with each other. Per use slash S of this, where it is manifest, even where and how they know about that. In other words, investigations, and their kids and things like that. And there's all kinds of trials going on, overt criminal enterprises and private ones. They were grouped wrong with counters to them originally instilled, the way the breaching method assigned that. So there were overt criminal enterprises, private ones, hundreds of different countries involved with what Jim Crow laws are about. And that method, blaming other things, others, ourselves, even when it was true, using those truths for lies, exactly the way the breaching method, like about white. Black and white were enslaved, tortured, extorted. But you guys can't even be honest about the torture and extortion of George Washington. We're supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. We would have realized that he was using James Madison's plan, and no one had means for freedom, and everyone had to pretend other. Otherwise, they were sentenced, even if they were majority people, even if they're everyone black pupils. We are in a semi-ancient trap that came from before modern religious messengers were even born. The significance of how people see there are people that are going to blame other things, others ourselves, and just say, okay, these are the economic variables. Let's talk economics. See, those people can't afford to have mandated law followed. To get away with it, they sell their styles that the breaching method set up predicate acts with facts in databases already. And then they self-value that. All sides in criminal and civil cases, the courts and interstates, they have roles with crime methods, with the police forms and the interbranch, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and news at the same time. A certain type of forgiveness is to use that to discern the breaching method there too, discernible, hyper-evidentially. A breaching method assigned how we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time as a means to discern the identity of the hyper-simultaneous. That is manifest in demonstration of how it communicates having being. Why and how there are other species bodies too that are not itself but are anyway. And when you're observing it, it's how it's making more of itself. It's the science of the study of the extent of the identity, the hyper-simultaneous that we are capable of discerning. And where that extent comes, it comes also with its complete identity of relationship to itself. So it comes with a part of itself that is discernible another way. And it comes with the only increasing value of that equally. All three of those are equally increasing. Like, for example, with the value of what was itself as what truly came first. And relative to questions associated, it uses how its system is domestic. In other words, Native Americans had this breaching method before America's founders were even born. They had a breaching method sustained on them. And has not gone away, just like it has not gone away against presidents and chiefs, because it has not. We only have our schools that remain breached. Other things, others, ourselves are communicating and were communicating. For George Washington, other things, others, ourselves were blamed for negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And they're being blamed right through our schools that our founders communicated for us to blame in the breaching method. In other words, people keep using the word hegemony. Not one president has had defenses of their names because this use of names and the nature of debate contains criminally foreign influence quality aspects and nature as criminal insidiousness nature / hypercriminal insidiousness. I'm not a lawyer, but we have just hyper evidentially recorded how lawyers, all sides of criminal and civil cases, their sources and the interbranch had collusions at the same time with the breaching method. That is what witch trials were about, even if they had to be made up, regardless of who made them up. One of the things they're about is about the breaching method, the crazy laws against everyone. Otherwise, that body would be censed, including if that body was a majority of people. In other words, including if it was everybody. This breaching method has to sustain not just individuals and groups to hurt each other. Because no group, because that's what nature shows us when it's showing us the species volume science /S as its own, as its identity of relationship to itself and the value of that. Greater than and more finite than, and with active relativity of math, where how it also uses how it is not the identity I mean, the scientists don't share an identity, but they do anyway. Same reason and why and how we have the same color eyes, why we have different color eyes. And there are exceptions. See, nature communicates regarding exceptions in exception nature distinctly. So this breaching method knew that the experts on things like criminal enterprises and like terrorism, they would they would value self-value roles and defend roles keeping groupings of humanity and humanity voicings and about individuals worth simultaneously grouped and together as systems tactical ulterior from how nature uses it. We're supposed to value it per nature system. So that's why they leave out exceptions, exception nature. So in other words, they have intelligence relative to wealth, but there are all kinds of locations associated with all natures of law, private and interbranch and intelligence tied to them. The difference of that and the news at the same time, planting predicate acts with facts methods. Speaking anyway, pretend they're about free speech. You can't be about liberty until you have freedom. If you want to pretend other, you have to say and get away with it. You have to self-value. All sides in criminal and civil cases, all sides and their lawyers in the interbranch, switching names, sequences, forging names, forcing equality of fact, treating nature as collusion /S with the crime scenes, even the World Trade Center attack. So they're putting fake things in every database you went to, especially in New York City. And that's predicate acts with facts roles, with influences to do such from off the campuses. But this breaching method knew that would be because collusion /S, collusions were only allowed. Otherwise, that body would be discerned for what was only allowed for the all individual grouped and all together. Natures of industries, natures of social things, all natures of subjects, complete possession over them as systems tactical ulterior from the one that communicates about positive and negative in ways that not one A through Z could afford to discern, even though it's simple and where it's complicated, it shows us how to, in other words, it talks about, in other words, these five, you can have sequence, you have convictions, leaving out the value of, and has collusions with sequence shifts. That's in other words, one part of what can be true always. Their truths can be used for lies, for example, in other words, truths can be used to screen lies. Truths can be used to screen actual motivations. And this breaching method it propagates the appearance of actual motivations, actual ones to be used to keep the real motivations from being discerned. The real motivations this breaching method has inseparable roles from all natures of cases. So there are hyper evidential things. The Ninth Circuit Court has names also next to at the locations next to it, which is right next to the World Trade Center, which no World Trade has roles with all kinds of natures of business industries and language associated with them for to do business that can't defend that and afford defend it syntactically the Constitution unabridged and all our rights at the same time. This breaching method knew that would be self-value, where there is and has been a nature of chaos that was also taught to call itself order. In other words, the difference between is something. In other words, you need to have order in a court, but obviously they need to have people scream out. Not the way that we show them. They'll make examples to justify what they do. But the courts have been collusions at the crime scenes. They forge and switch the names because nature has manifest their roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, blaming other things, others themselves, for the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures in suburbs, let alone New York City. Suburbs were designed before America's founders were born. They were designed for the torture, extortion, slavery method. We have been prevented this because we have offensively taught what can't be defended and afford to be discerned, that which even the youngest kids are capable of discerning, which is simultaneously the maintained possession of America by a human fact cheating nature breaching method. If you're a guy who disbelieves, they have the social media of the courts personally and professionally involved with them. They're increasingly involved with extortion at other locations, torture, slavery. I'm going to show you how to, in other words, we could build things better than, we can't afford things through these systems to to overcome how the breaching method designed the suburbs tactically denatured. And how anyone could, for example, it's why and how, it's relative to why and how, and anyone could even ignore, in other words, get away with pretending that not to be able to discern how New York City was only allowed to be a part of the torture, extortion, slavery method. The truth is used for a lie that the North was fighting for freedom, because the North and the South had roles with slavery still. But they had to go in the phases the way our founders left it, because they had to force alliances who were still themselves enslaved and force roles with slavery, including with the counters to it. New York City. They need people swearing because of how it is exploited at other locations, /S, and all names against their own. And then they say, oh, what did you say? In other words, they're putting fake transcripts too. On the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center that day, they post-dated legal papers from inside the Ninth Circuit Court. That was proven. Whole bunch of things hyper-evidentially recorded tied to it. Wethersfield police make questions about that. No one realizes. These are people that have been putting kids and their families to fake and change communications with themselves, with the news, and with interbranch families at the same time. New Britain's Superior Court and Hartford courts have collusions with FBI, state police, foreign and domestic military at West Hartford locations before the World Trade Center attack. Years before it, shortly before it, and then in that attack context. It also has something to do with the roles with Elm Street and Wethersfield and Rocky Hill, and names associated with there, who have been planting evidences and databases at campuses tied to that. And vertically and horizontally, there are confessions tied to that, where confessions are communicated and where what is said is involved with the evidence racketeering methods. They have uses of charges on a mass scale where they put charges and the writing's all fake. And they put arrays or they switch officers' names, put things in databases. Same people in the background pretending to be for police or against police. You're either for them or against them. In other words, they're leaving out exception nature. They're leaving out how the voices of the law have stayed criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought black peoples. Fear. Please get them onto paper. The news is recorded, confessed. WFSB and CNN recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed their influence to pretend it's personal when we ask them to change their roles, planting evidences WFSB had me in a fake conversation with them about the World Trade Center attack, with people involved with medical and other abuses of kids, and sexual and digital, and men and women involved with digital crimes with kids' pictures, because they've been putting fake evidences at the same times with the same ones, foreign domestic military. And Eric Burgess is one of the ones with the FBI Director Luskin and his co-defendants and courts, Harper courts and the Britain Superior Court, that affected Eric Burgess and Mark Violet and other people tied to ones in wire crimes on my street with the Wethersfield Police confessions. They're also forging names, switching names, using part of names to keep. They're using time criminally, foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, readings of statutes and precedents. They should fear God now. Or get the heck on paper and get a promotion, because you have guys that are getting out. They're in the way. They've never been free. In other words, this police chief Cintron and 1 years ago involved with this Kalula house, with wire crimes and falsified police reports, with a O'Brien family, increasingly with people at Central Connecticut State University, Covington Street family members, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with being and having been child abused by the same people, with prosecutors and judges, like with a Rick Cianfaglione, involved with prosecutors and judges with Connecticut's district court, who is involved also with people with the name Scalora. I never seen him around Scalora. Scalora is one of the ones who I never saw on a campus in my life. They tried to make a fake exception real quick in a Glastonbury campus, where he's involved with, like, to try to yell out my name to try to make it look like I know him. It has something to do with people with whiting forensics and his cousins, different names too. Increasingly, Wethersfield Police forging, switching names, wire crimes, falsified police reports, medical offenders of kids at the same time with their patients and criminals. If you're a guy with their family, get them on paper.